Good day, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We begin today in Peru, where the COP20 Climate Change Summit is finishing up in the capital of Lima. On Thursday, both underdeveloped and developed countries were unable to reach an agreement on a draft document to be presented at the next climate change summit next year. The new document would replace the Kyoto Protocol. It is still unclear if the countries will reach a compromise before the end of the summit on Friday. We now go to Colombia, where peace talks between the government and the FARC rebels are entering their third day in Havana, Cuba. It comes after they were stalled in November. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry will meet with Colombian President Juan Manuel Santos on Friday to discuss the peace process. Meanwhile, family members of those forcibly disappeared by the Colombian government have welcomed a major victory in their search for justice. But as Charles Parkinson reports, their quest for answers remains ongoing.
At
a press conference in Bogotá on December 11th, family members of people forcibly disappeared by the Colombian military during the 1985 Palace of Justice siege came together to welcome a decision by the Inter-American Court for Human Rights to condemn the Colombian government. The court found evidence of torture and at least one extrajudicial killing and ordered a payout in excess of $7 million to the families.
It's better to avoid this, to respond to violations directly, and not have to rely on an international decision which identifies the culprits internationally as violators of human rights. National justice systems should strengthen themselves exactly to avoid these rulings that are shameful for governments.
Luis Carlos Ospina worked for the state as a bus driver when his partner of 13 years, Gloria Estela Lizarazo, went to work in the Palace Cafe and never came back. He was left with 3 small children to bring up and a silence from the same state he served that has now lasted more than 29 years. He welcomes the court decision, but still wants answers.
It's an achievement because now it's becoming a reality. What happened with our loved ones? Now they are being recognised. But what we need is that they tell us where they are and what they did with them. That is what we are waiting for.
For almost 3 decades, the Colombian state has remained silent on this emblematic case of forced disappearance. The question now is whether the decision of the Inter-American Court for Human Rights will force them to speak out and provide the peace of mind that the victims' families crave. Charles Parkinson, Telesur in Bogotá, Colombia.
Now to Mexico, where we continue to follow the outrage after the disappearance of 43 students. The parents of the missing students reacted with anger at the government's accusations that they are being manipulated. The parents announced that they will hold massive events on the 23rd and 27th of December to continue demanding the resignation of President Enrique Peña Nieto. For more now on the movement for justice in Mexico and what some are calling digital censorship of the protest movement, we go to our correspondent Clayton Kahn.
Once again, a high-trending social networking hashtag representing protest over the Ayotzinapa case has disappeared. The Ya Me Cansé 2 disappeared on Thursday from being the #1 topic in Mexico for Twitter users since the previous hashtag Ya Me Cansé disappeared more than a week ago. Ya Me Cansé is a reference to comments made by Mexico's Attorney General on November 7th at a press conference regarding the 43 Ayotzinapa students, where the official said he was tired, spawning a sharp backlash from social network users using the phrase "I am tired" to describe their inconformities. Now experts say the first protest hashtag that had more than 4 million mentions within a 26-day period was brought down apparently by bot attacks. Many have called the removal as digital censorship to popular protest. However, a new hashtag has now spawned, Ya Me Cansé 3, which is now trending as one of the #1 topics in Twitter. In general, social networking has played a definitive role in the growing protest movement in solidarity with the Ayotzinapa students. This is Clayton Kahn reporting for Telesur here in Mexico City.
And thanks to Clayton, we go to Venezuela now, where President Nicolás Maduro has rejected U.S. threats of sanctions on Venezuela. Maduro's criticisms were echoed by the Bolivarian Alliance for Our America regional bloc. The group released a statement condemning the continued intervention of the United States in Latin America. President Maduro read the declaration in a televised address Thursday evening.
Bolivariana para los pueblos de nuestra América desean enfatizar que no permitirán la utilización de viejas prácticas ya aplicadas en países de la región dirigidas a propiciar el cambio de régimen político tal cual ha ocurrido en otras regiones del mundo.
Also out of Venezuela, the government continues to embark on reforms to the nation's police force to improve public safety. Here's Rachel Boothroyd.
This week, Venezuela's newly created Commission for Police Reform will begin a restructure of 7 different security bodies. It's the latest move in the ongoing reform, which began in 2006, aimed at humanising the country's infamously repressive security bodies, which regularly killed and disappeared citizens in the past. According to human rights activist Antonio Gonzalez, the country has witnessed a clear reduction in human rights abuses over the past 8 years.
Between 2006 and 2010, we were in the design stages. Between 2010 and 2013, we were just beginning to implement the process. And then from 2013 onwards, it started to tail off. The pace of the reform slowed down. Right now, they are proposing a renewal of the reform. That's how I would define the various stages.
The process began with a mass consultation in 2006, which eventually led to the creation of a new policing model in Venezuela. It marks a rupture with the country's history of routinized repression and focuses on working with local communities to tackle the roots of crime. It's an approach which has proved popular with citizens.
At least here in Katia, in working class areas, we have to recognize that the assistance of the national police has been positive. Naturally, they can have a number of defects, but my overall assessment of the work of the national police in the community is positive. It has been more positive than negative.
Whilst the move to deepen the country's police reform has been welcomed by the majority of citizens, many are in agreement that more needs to be done to combat violent crime and to truly revolutionise Venezuela's security forces. Rachel Boothroyd for Telesur in Caracas, Venezuela.
We move now to Cuba, where former President Fidel Castro has been recognized in China for China's version of the Nobel Peace Prize. The Chinese offered the award to the former Cuban leader. The leader of the Cuban Revolution was awarded the renowned Confucius Peace Prize, it's called, owing to his work in denouncing the role of the United States in instigating conflicts around the world. Turning now to the United States, international pressure is mounting to prosecute U.S. officials who authorized torture of detainees in the wake of 9/11. Here's Alexandra Hall.
Torture, enhanced interrogation techniques. Different terms for what's detailed in a recent report on the CIA's methods for extracting information in the wake of September 11th in the United States. The United Nations says Bush administration officials who ordered their use should be held accountable for violations under the Convention Against Torture. Experts say different interpretations of the word itself could be used.
There's been a kind of double dance. We say, first of all, oh, it's not torture, so it's not a crime. Second, we say, well, if it is torture, it was justified. Now, justified, I don't think, works in a court of law. Okay, not torture might work.
But what would the public think if interrogators escaped criminal charges?
I would be comfortable with knowing what to jail, because I think there's a lot of things that we don't want to know, and that's the cost of war.
I think that charges should be looked into, more on the side of perhaps the administration officials, perhaps, than the actual CIA folks who were basically just doing as they were told.
The Justice Department has already opted not to prosecute, and ultimately, as long as those involved are physically within the United States, the federal government has the final word.
I think that it clearly was torture, and I'm not saying that it wasn't a crime. I think it clearly was a crime. But I'm not sure that there's anybody who is politically willing and able to prosecute that crime.
Unless the International Criminal Court gets involved. Even though some countries where interrogations took place are participants in the court, it isn't certain if any are willing to get involved. Alexandra Hall, Telesur, Washington.
And in the UK, the Guardian newspaper revealed Friday that the United Kingdom requested that the United States hide British involvement in the CIA torture program. According to the newspaper, the UK government had access to the report before its release. The revealing information has raised concern that the report actually conceals important information to protect close allied countries, which also participated in the gruesome program. And to the Middle East, the Iraqi government has announced its plans to launch an attack on Mosul, the country's second largest city. The area is currently under control of the Islamic State. The Iraqi government says it is ready to take back the city. The U.S. military has warned the Iraqis that they will need more training. The operation would prove specifically delicate due to its urban setting. It is unclear whether the United States will assist the Iraqis by sending their advisors to fight in the battlefield. And in Ukraine, Defense Minister Stefan Poltorak has announced he will seek to double his ministry's spending. Poltorak will request funding for new weapons and equipment to fight the rebels in the east. The announcement comes a day after Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk pleaded to the international community for financial help to prevent the country's economy from sinking into a default. We end today in Spain, where the parliament has approved a new citizen security law dubbed as a gag law by human rights activists. The legislation increases police power and declares any protest in front of a government building illegal. The law imposes fines to citizens for any action considered to be a lack of respect to authorities. Activists who take pictures or videos of police officers can also face jail time for their actions. More on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle.